Welcome to Chapter 7 for Business Foundation BUSA 100, talking about organization, teamwork, and communication. So this is the name of our chapter, and we're going to move forward. My mouse doesn't quite work, but we're going to discuss all of these learning objectives, explaining the importance of organizational culture, defining organizational structure, describing how specialization and departmentalization can help an organization achieve results, and a number of all these learning objectives will be discussed in Part A and Part B of this discussion today. Now let's get into the culture. You hear this word all the time, but what does it really mean? Well, an organization's culture is basically a firm's shared values, beliefs, tradition, rules, and role models for behavior. You see this in organizations, but you really feel it more than anything. So sometimes behaviors and programs basically enhance and support the organizational culture. So there are a number of examples regarding this, but basically a firm's culture can be expressed in a formal way through maybe a mission statement or a code of ethics or some sort of ceremony or manual that they may develop. It can also be pretty informal. For example, now of course this is more formal, but McDonald's has an organizational structure that focuses on value and service and cleanliness. Companies like Nordstrom may stress more of an excellent customer service because of the type of store they are. But informally, culture such as dress code and work habits can tell you a lot about a company and exactly how they feel about the organization or the culture itself. Now, what happens with these attitudes and behaviors associated with corporate culture? You ensure that organizational members do a number of things. There should be some sort of shared value associated with this, or maybe some sort of shared problem-solving approach. All that goes back to the attitudes and behavior they have about the overall corporate structure. For example, Disney World, we love to go there, but unfortunately they're closed too. Embrace a corporate culture that focuses on the guest. And that's what we experience, and that's why we go there. It's all about the service and the experience. Now let's look at this graph here. It talks about what's important, what's not important on the lower level of the graph, and what's very important. So culture and engagement, you can see, basically is neck and neck with the leadership of the actual organization. So you have other components here associated with it, but these are desired attitudes and behaviors that we associate with corporate cultures. The arrangement or relationships of position within the organization. You have to really get people to work together, which is really, really difficult to do, but it can be done in an organizational structure. So an organizational structure develops when a manager assigns tasks to particular people or work group, or they seek to coordinate the diverse activities required to reach the firm's objectives. So there's a number of things that happen in this organizational structure. So you see this on sports teams, you see this at restaurants. Everyone should know their role in an organizational structure, but it takes time to develop it. So you may have heard what an organizational chart is. It's basically a visual display of the structure of the chain of command. So you have these certain people who report to someone else, who report to someone else. So this next structure talks about what it looks like as far as this organizational structure is concerned. So you have certain areas here where there's an owner, and so you talk about where the owner is, and then it moves into a new organizational structure where the owner has people who are working with them. And then the owner here has several people working for them on this top level, but then they have people working for them too. So you have these different phases in how organizations continue to develop and structure based on this. Now, for example, Zappos adopted an organizational structure called holacracy, a structure in which job titles are abandoned, managers are eliminated, and people just really work in their own pace in this organizational structure. So let's move on to assigning tasks. How do we assign tasks to make sure all the work gets done? Well, two important aspects of designing those work activities are specialization and departmentalization. The division of labor into small little tiny pieces and the assignment of employees to do a single task. Basically focus on this. The reason you want to specialize because it's efficient. It's easy to train, and the activities could be too much for one person. When you over-specialize, things happen. People get bored, they're not satisfied, they may have injuries, or they may not want to come to work at all. So those are negative consequences of over-specialization. Job specialization. You see this in factories, but you'll see it in different areas. So job specialization is common in automobile manufacturing. So by dividing the work into smaller, tiny pieces, employees can perform their work more quickly and more efficiently. Departmentalization, the grouping of jobs into working units called departments, units, groups, or divisions. What this does is helps us to be more productive based on how we're functionalized in our department. So we're going to spend a few moments going through a few of these areas to address these top 4 areas. Functional departmentalization is the grouping of jobs that perform similar functions. So for example, in most companies, there's one finance department, there's one marketing department, and there's one human resource department. And the reason that's functional is because it helps to keep things in order and make sure that all these different departments know their role and function in an organizational structure. So one weakness of this area is that it tends to emphasize departmental units rather than the organization as a whole. Product departmentalization, the organization of jobs in relation to the products of the firm. So you see where everything is. So there's a president here and he has all these different areas. So you have stereo equipment division, computer division, so on and so forth. All of these are basically specialized around a particular department, as you can see. Geographic, where are people located? It's simply the grouping of jobs according to where they're located, the state, the region, the country, etc. And so you have Pacific area, European area, Middle Eastern, etc. All of these are considered geographical areas that are really important to just understand how all these areas work together in these various regions. Lastly, you have customer departmentalization. What areas are people arranged by based on the type of customers they serve? So you will see this as well. Now, for example, PepsiCo is organized into various business units. It includes units such as Frito-Lay, Quaker Foods, and of course has all of this Latin American food and snack businesses organized by these various units. And so they talk about this being as a case as to why you're looking at how businesses are organized. So this gives you an idea of the functionalization of organization of businesses. Delegation of authority. This should be the greatest thing going. But delegation doesn't mean you give people tasks, but more so you more empower them to make commitments and use resources to carry out certain tasks and to make sure those get done. As businesses continue to grow, the number of complex decisions they have to make also grows. And really one person can't handle all of that. So you delegate. So the delegation of authority frees up a manager to concentrate on larger issues such as planning or dealing with strategic organization or just basically handling problems in the organization as a whole. You have these 2 big components that are really important in business: accountability and responsibility. The principle of responsibility is related to what you would expect, an obligation. People need to carry out these assigned tasks. If you're accountable, that means you accept the assignment and the authority to carry out the assignment. And so these are 2 areas that I think are really important when you're thinking about organizing an organization or a team. Degree of centralization. Centralized organization is a structure in which authority is concentrated at the top and very little decision-making authority is delegated at the lower levels. So really you'll have a manager who says, hey, this is what you need to take care of and get it done, and that's what you do. And so you have this centralized way decisions are being made. Conversely, you have the decentralized organizations, an organization in which decision-making authority is delegated far down the chain of command as possible. So that way people get a chance to get things done without being encumbered by all these layers of management. Span of management is basically the number of subordinates who report to a manager. So sometimes when you have an organization, you may have one person who's over 5 people and another person over 25 people. Typically, when you're at a higher level, you don't supervise as many people, but sometimes the lower level managers supervise a number of people to get a lot of things done. So you have this wide span of management and you have this narrow span of management. And so those 2 organizational structures kind of work together. But the levels of management organization is pretty complex. So a company with many layers of managers is considered tall. Kind of makes sense. The span of management is narrow. Organizations with fewer levels are flat and have wide spans of management. So for example, smaller businesses may be more flat in their organizational structure. So let's take a look at how this looks. So we'll have the line structure. line and staff structure, multidivisional structure, and the matrix structure. All of these are very different, so managers must consider how to structure their authority and their relationship, and what structure the organization will have, and how it's going to appear on the organizational chart. So you think you want to be a leader and be in management? Well, all these things matter as you're relating to your overall goals. So look at line structure. Line structure is the simplest organizational structure in which direct lines of authority extends beyond from the top management to the lowest level of the organization. It's a very clear chain of command which enables managers to make decisions very quickly, and it's very common in small businesses, and so you will see this a good bit on page 214. And the line structure actually focuses on a number of areas as you're related to how the organization works. So you want to keep that in mind as you're going through how you're going to be able to put these structures in place at your organization. The line staff structure, the next version, said it focuses on their area of expertise in the operation of the business. So they're in a right area. May experience problems because you have overstaffing or just kind of lines of communication that's not really well defined. So here's an example of what it could be. So you have these line relationships here, and then you have the staff relationships. So it looks a little bit differently in terms of structural organization. Multidivisional structure, a structure that organizes departments into larger groups that we call divisions, occurs in organizations as they grow larger. They can be formed on the same basis as departments. So you can be customer-based, product-based, or based on the geography or where you live. The matrix structure incorporates a number of different areas. So for example, one of the first organizations to design and implement a matrix structure was NASA for the space program, because it needed to basically coordinate different projects all at the same time. And so this works really well. Matrix structures provides flexibility, enhance cooperation, and creativity to allow the organization to respond in a very quick, easy fashion. So here's an opportunity to see how it actually looks in a matrix-based structure. A little bit different. Groups and teams. This is where I really like the idea of understanding how groups and teams are organized. And so all teams are groups, but not all groups are teams. A group here is two or more people who communicate with one another and share a common goal. Makes sense, right? Team is a small group whose members have complementary skills, they have a common purpose, and they hold themselves mutually accountable. So a team of people, for example, could be your class or your team that you're working on right now. Those are considered team members. The group could be the entire class, for example, if you will. But basically, typically in this environment, a group is two or more people. A team is basically a small group that's over and having complementary skills, have a common purpose, etc. So here's a good graph that we're going to finish up on part A here, and then start part B in just a few moments. Working groups here have strong, clear, focused leader, has individual accountability, has the same purpose as the broader organizational mission, runs efficient meetings, measures effectiveness indirectly, discusses, decides, and delegates. So here you'll see teams has shared leadership role, individual accountability, etc. So they're very similar, but they're still different in some ways. And you can see this information here on page 217, graphic 7.1, that provides you the working group and the team. I kind of think this is a really cool graphic, because the type of groups an organization establishes depends on the task that it needs to accomplish and the situation it faces. So there are things called virtual teams, which, for example, we're working in a virtual environment now. And so virtual teams also end up with opportunities for different companies. And so this is another way that you can actually see the importance of team and team sharing. Now we will pick up on this slide here on part B.